For those who really want to come forward to be a witness in a criminal prosecution involving what you call extrajudicial killings, then please come forward. We will welcome these people who wish to put forward their testimonies. The work is ongoing right now.
Will the DOJ still share information with the ICC? Remulla says the country will do it not to comply, but out of courtesy. Anjo Alimario, CNN Philippines.
Human rights advocates say President Bongbong Marcos's refusal to rejoin the International Criminal Court promotes what they call a climate of impunity. The group, Karapatan, says this indicates Mr. Marcos's disregard for civil and political rights, the plight of drug war victims and their families, as well as their calls for accountability. Karapatan adds Marcos effectively denied them justice. The group vows to support efforts to hold accountable government officials who paved the way for what it says was, quote, the brazen mass murder during the Duterte administration. A personal doctor of the president is the new Food and Drug Administration chief. Dr. Samuel Zacate, lead physician of President Marcos, treated the chief executive when he got COVID-19 last month. Palace says Zacate is a public health advocate and a consultant for government offices. He has years of experience in medicine as a diplomate of the Philippine Society of Venerologists and a fellow of the International College of Surgeons.
As you know, to be the FDA head, you have to at least be a doctor or a pharmacist. So yeah, he is qualified, plus he has several distinctions. So we're not sure if his being a personal physician actually factored into this, considering he ticks all the boxes, meaning lahat ng requirements bilang FDA he fulfills.
President Marcos picks engineer Carlo Di Mayuga as acting MMDA chairman. Di Mayuga will replace Romando Artes, appointed by former President Duterte in March. A retired general of the National Police becomes secretary of the Office of the Presidential Advisor on Military Affairs, or OPAMA. Roman Popong Felix was head of the Provincial Police in President Marcos's home province, Ilocos Norte, and regional director of the Ilocos Regional Police Office. Retired military General Ariel Caculitan will also join OPAMA as Undersecretary. On your screens are other newly designated officials. The Office of the Vice President adds buses for the Libreng Sakay scheme in Metro Manila and other key cities. The OVP says an initial fleet of 5 buses will be used to provide free rides to the public, 2 in Metro Manila and 1 each in Davao, Bacolod, and Cebu. Vice President Sara Duterte says these buses have been lent to them by some companies since the campaign. The 2 units for Metro Manila will be plying the EDSA busway during rush hour.
I am hoping that this is just a start of many fruitful collaborations with the private sector that are willing to spare their resources to provide much needed relief to the public, especially now that the country continues to reel and recover from the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic and grappling from the effects of the economic crisis. Sa muli,
Duterte spokesperson Reynold Munsayak says the OVP will pay for fuel and maintenance of the units, while the bus companies will pay for the salaries of the drivers and conductors. Should other bus companies participate in the program, Munsayak says they eye to deploy more units along Commonwealth Avenue in Quezon City. A recent survey shows almost half, or 48%, of Filipino families felt poor in the last months of the Duterte administration. The social weather stations estimated the self-rate poor Filipino families at around 12.2 million from 10.9 million in April. Of this number, respondents from the Visayas rose the highest, followed by Metro Manila, Mindanao, and Balance, Luzon. Meanwhile, around 31% of respondents say they are borderline poor and 21% consider themselves not poor. The survey was conducted from June 26 to 29 among 1,500 respondents nationwide. The Health Department is open to a proposed Senate investigation into the country's COVID-19 vaccination program. Senator Risa Ontiveros wants a probe, citing reports and government pronouncements that from April to July, anywhere between 4 million to 27 million doses of unused and expired vaccines are bound to be thrown away. Ontiveros says these are worth around 5 to 13 billion pesos. She adds this may mean an oversupply of vaccines. But Health Officer in charge Maria Rosario Vergere denies this, while Vergere says they're ready to explain everything in a proper forum. She says vaccine wastage is common in national vaccine deployment programs.
We will always be open naman para sa mga ganitong pag-iimbestiga para makapagpaliwanag po tayo ng maayos and having that right platform or avenue kung saan pwede tayong makapagbigay ng datos at maipaliwanag. So we will be explaining all of these things through our data and analytics kapag dating po ng pag-iimbestiga na yan.
Former presidential advisor for entrepreneurship Joey Concepcion earlier said over 5 billion pesos worth of COVID-19 vaccines bought by the private sector expired in July. Former Task Force Against COVID-19 advisor Ted Herbosa blamed the Health Department for, quote, failing to mobilize resources during this pandemic, unquote. News overseas now. United States House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is not backing down against Chinese threats, saying her visit to Taiwan shows America stands with the island nation. Pelosi is the first highest-ranking U.S. official to visit Taiwan in 25 years. Tristan Nodalo reports.
China is carrying out joint military exercises around Taiwan in response to the controversial visit of U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, despite Beijing's strong objections. The joint military drills will be conducted at multiple locations in Taiwan, and China says that their military is also on high alert. There will be sea and air exercises and long-range and live fire drills along the Taiwan Strait in the next 4 days. Beijing says it will exhaust all means to defend its sovereignty and territorial integrity. China has also summoned the U.S. ambassador to lodge its protest over Pelosi's visit.
China has only been compelled to act out of self-defense, and any countermeasure that China will take would be justified and necessary.
But Pelosi says her visit only affirms U.S. commitment and support for Taiwan's vibrant democracy. They are also not veering away from the so-called One China policy. Russia and North Korea condemn the U.S. move, while the United Nations reiterates the UN resolution in 1971 recognizing only one China. Philippine officials are also closely monitoring the developments in Taiwan.
Lahat ng mga factories doon, meron na pala silang ready shelters, merong ready evacuation centers. And then meron din tayo on our part, we also have our own shelters for our OFWs, and we already have a program for repatriation in case there is a necessity to do that.
Government data show that some 200,000 Filipinos are working and living in Taiwan, and most of them are in the manufacturing industry sector. In Guangzhou, China, Tristan Nodalo, CNN Philippines.
Taiwan is in talks with Japan and the Philippines to find alternative aviation routes ahead of the live fire drills. Here at home, the government refuses to react to China-U.S. tensions, which could affect international relations. Straight ahead on Newsnight, a new law requires stronger efforts against online sexual abuse of children. Amor Santos has that and more on other measures. And Stand Ahead takes us to the hometown of former President Fidel Ramos in Pangasinan, where a memorial museum will be built to honor the 12th president. Details after the break.
RPN DXKP Pagadian, ang inyong Radyo Ronda. RPN Radio Philippines Network. Radio Philippines Network. Live to the world, pinaagi sa FB page, karon mag-download na. Pinaagi sa Google Play og Apple Store, YouTube og Twitter. Alang sa mas ipakuskan ng mga balita, komentaryo, kasayuran og kalingawan. Ang mas ipakuskan ng inyong Radyo Ronda. Member, kapisanan ng mga broadcaster ng Pilipinas.
Welcome back to CNN Philippines. Dozens of bills passed by the 18th Congress have lapsed into law under the Marcos administration. Amor Santos tells us about one of the measures providing stronger protection against online sexual abuse of children.
These social media pages prey on children. According to UNICEF, 20% of minors aged 12 to 17 have been sexually abused online. The new Anti-Online Sexual Abuse or Exploitation of Children Act provides an institutionalized approach against these crimes. A national coordinating center shall prevent any form of child sexual abuse and protect, heal, and reintegrate victims. Online platforms are tasked to preserve the evidence, take down offensive material, and report the crime to authorities. Even internet shops should block or filter sites containing sexually explicit activities involving children.
Yung mga dating nakita na ng NBI at PNP na mga code words which raise red flags in their minds, dinidisguise nila sa mga mistulang inosente or innocuous terms. So kailangan subaybayan din po iyan.
Senator Risa Ontiveros also expressed grave concern over cases where the minors themselves spread their photos or videos in exchange for money. She says the law is a step in the right direction, but much more needs to be done.
Kaya pa lang niyang i-enable at kaya pa lang ng law enforcers, state of the technology na may access tayo, ma-reach yung mga Googleable na materyales, sites, groups. Hindi pa tagos ito sa tinatawag na dark web, end-to-end encryption, private messaging.
The anti-OSAIC bill is among dozens of measures passed by the previous Congress that President Bongbong Marcos let lapse into law. Others include the doubling of social pension of indigent senior citizens from 500 to 1,000 pesos per month. Another law makes permanent the validity of birth, marriage, and death certificates, while another measure requires large enterprises to recover and process the plastic packaging wastes used on their products so they won't end up in landfills.
The large companies are very prepared for this kasi this is a practice abroad. And when you say large companies, they are mostly multinational. So they have been doing this in other countries. So it's easy for them to do it here.
Lawmakers are now looking forward to convene the Legislative Executive Development Advisory Council in the next 2 weeks to discuss priority measures of both branches of government. Amor Santos, CNN Philippines.
A teachers group urges lawmakers to override President Marcos's veto on a bill seeking to grant tax exemptions for the honoraria of poll workers. Members of the Alliance of Concerned Teachers staged a protest outside the Batasang Pambansa in Quezon City Wednesday. The group wants lawmakers to vote in favor of the bill, which overwhelmingly passed both houses of Congress. A vetoed bill becomes a law if 2/3 of the Senate and House vote separately to override it.
Para sa amin, nakaka-frustrate po ito dahil parang hindi binibigyan ng pagpapahalaga yung sakripisyo ng mga teachers. Naniniwala po kami na maninindigan yung ating mga mambabatas para sa ating mga guro at election poll workers.
President Marcos says he decided not to sign the bill because it runs counter, he said, to the government's tax program. He is instead proposing financial aid for poll workers, but teachers groups are rejecting the idea. Academic groups urging the administration to push for the use of Filipino as primary language for teaching in schools. The Tanggol Wika Alliance says Filipino students perform poorly in international assessments because major subjects in basic education are taught in English. The group wants a law to require at least 9 units of Filipino and 3 units of Panitikan or Philippine literature in the higher education curriculum.
Tama na yung polisiya na English lang ang pinapahalagahan. Mas pahalagahan natin ang wikang sarili. Kasi nasubukan na natin from 1906 na English lang ang pinapahalagahan sa tayo napunta. Nandyan tayo sa isang sitwasyon na ine-export pa rin natin ang ating mga kababayan para lang makakuha ng dolyar ang gobyerno.
In his Buwan ng Wika message released yesterday, President Marcos said speaking in a foreign language is not the only basis for intelligence, but in his first State of the Nation address, Mr. Marcos said he wants Filipinos to maintain their advantage in English because it is favored by foreign employers. It's that time of the year again where teachers, parents, and students participate in the National Schools Maintenance Week, or Brigada Escuela, to prepare for the opening of classes. Chrissy Di Matulak checked how a school in Metro Manila kicked off the initiative, with classrooms expected to fully reopen soon after more than 2 years of the pandemic.
Catherine De Leon is a parent of a second-grade student in San Antonio Elementary School in Quezon City. A couple of weeks before school starts, De Leon and the other parents brought along their cleaning materials to help prepare for the return of students.
Sa panahon ngayon, nag-uuso po ngayon yung dengue, kaya mas maganda po na malinis po yung bawat room po ng mga estudyante para iwas po sa sakit.
According to one of the guardians, being hands-on with the preparations ensures that it's safe for students to return to school.
Para po safe yung mga bata, lalo na kasi maliliit pa sila eh. Grade 2 pa lang yung dito na papasok.
On Wednesday, Brigada Escuela, a yearly activity before the resumption of classes, was launched in San Antonio Elementary School, which was participated in by around 500 parents and students. The campaign for the school's Brigada is a toxic-free and waste-free school year, as it aims to ban harmful chemicals such as lead and mercury in the campus. Lead is usually found in paint products, while mercury is used in thermometers.
Ang ganitong chemical ay neurotoxin. Ang pangunahing inaatake nito ay ang utak. Nakakapagpahina ito ng utak ng mga bata. Kung sila ay may expose sa ganitong klaseng lason, ano na lang yung kahihinatnan ng kinabukasan ng mga bata.
According to the school officials, they have noticed an increase in the number of enrollees with the implementation of face-to-face learning.
Yung mga dating tumigil sa pag-aaral dahil sa pandemic, ngayon bumabalik na sila. Then yung ating mga transferee from other schools, from private schools, dumadami na rin po. So yung average naming enrollees dito is 3,100. So ngayon, target namin madagdagan yun ng 10%.
Stakeholders made donations to the school to help them gather all the supplies they need for the students. Classes are expected to open on August 22. In San Antonio Elementary School, face-to-face classes will be held 3 days a week, while 2 days will be allotted for online classes. Chrissy Di Matulak, CNN Philippines.
A state funeral for former President Fidel Ramos has been scheduled for August 9th. That confirmation coming from Press Secretary Trixie Cruz Angeles. Citing security reasons, Cruz Angeles says there is still no word on whether President Marcos will attend the wake. The last state funeral for a president was in 1997 for Diosdado Macapagal. Ramos' hometown in the province of Pangasinan planning to build a memorial museum in his honor. Stanley Gaheta takes us to the municipality of Asingan.
In this small space inside the Leticia Shahani Library, named after the late former senator and sister of former President Fidel V. Ramos, Asingan residents take good care of the Ramos archives, which were contributed by the Ramos family years ago.
Meron tayo dito more written books of Fidel Ramos, then mga CDs and videos donated by the Ramos family. Laman ng mga CD is about EDSA, the people power, then presidency. Napaka-rare yung historical materials na ito.
Books have personalized signatures in red ink from the late president, which was his habit, symbolizing his dedication to educate Filipinos on the lessons of history. But to be able to pass on the FVR legacies to future generations, a bigger space is needed.
It's a good time din na magkaroon tayo ng rich collection about Asingan and Asinganyans.
Young Asinganyans believe this modest space has immeasurable historical lessons to teach Filipinos.
Because of him, President Ramos, the people of Asinganyan were recognized and empowered po.
As someone na hindi siya naabutan, I think he is a great inspiration for us students.
Here at the Asingan Tourism and Recreational Center, the local government plans to build a 10-meter by 30-meter memorial museum to honor the town's outstanding son Fidel V. Ramos. The museum will feature his many contributions to the country.
Nakita ko rin naman yung pagkakataon na magkaroon ka ng isang presidente sa bayan mo na nai-produce. Kaya sabi ko, isang karangalan. Because of him, talagang kilalang kilala ang Asingan. Lalong-lalo nung kanyang kapanahunan na bilang presidente.
FVR visited the municipality of Asingan in 2016, where he voted for the last time during that year's national elections.
It's high time for us to pay back his good service sa pagtatayo ng memorabilia niya, yung museum po. Baka yan yung magbubukas ng pagkakataon sa aming bayan na magkaroon kami ng turismo. So with President Fidel V. Ramos.
The municipal town will provide a budget of 15 million pesos for the construction of the museum and will also tap the Department of Tourism for additional support, hoping to keep the memory of FVR alive in the hearts of Asinganyans and all freedom-loving Filipinos. Stanley Gaete, CNN Philippines.
Tonight on Politics as Usual, we'll take a closer look at the late former president's life and legacy from a warrior to a nation's leader. His Interior Secretary, Rafi Alunan, veteran journalist, former Defense Press Corps reporter Manny Mogato, Navy Captain Leo Dimok of the AFP's J3, who will talk about funeral honors and services for a former Commander-in-Chief, and retired Colonel Dencio Acop, a longtime aide-de-camp of Ramos. Catch these interviews later at 8, only here on CNN Philippines. Coming up on Newsnight, updates on the PBA Philippine Cup semifinals and how Magnolia fared against defending champ TNT. And sad news for Pinoy Super Junior fans. One of the members has no choice but to sit out the group's Philippine concert. Details when we return.
RPN DXKP Pagadian. Ang inyong Radyo Ronda RPN. RPN Radio Philippines Network. Radio Philippines Network. Live to the world pinaagi sa FB page karon. Mag-download na pinaagi sa Google Play og Apple Store, YouTube og Twitter. Alang sa mas kipakuskan nga mga balita, komentaryo, kasayuran og kalingawan. Ang mas kipakuskan nga inyong Radyo Ronda.
Member, kapisanan ng mga broadcaster ng Pilipinas.
You're watching Newsnight. This year's PBA Philippine Cup champs are seeing action in South Korea soon for Season 1 of the East Asia Super League Tournament. On October 12, 7 p.m., the Pinoy squad will face Korean Basketball League team Anyang KGC, which recently recruited NCAA rookie MVP Renz Abando. The Philippine Cup runner-up also has a match on opening day, hosting the Bay Area Dragons here in Manila. Game tips off at 8 p.m. But which teams will represent the Philippines? The Philippine Cup semis began today with a win from reigning champions TNT Tropang Giga at the Araneta Coliseum in Quezon City. TNT beat the Magnolia Hotshots 108-96. Their next match is set for Friday, 6 p.m. Another semifinals match is underway. It is the Meralco Bolts versus the San Miguel Beermen, with San Miguel leading in the first quarter at 34-21. Now for BTS ARMYs, we're finding out more about the K-pop group's next collaboration. BTS vocalists Jin, V, Jimin, and Jungkook gave fans a look at the recording session for Bad Decisions, made with producer Benny Blanco and rapper Snoop Dogg. Benny also posted a trailer for the track, which quickly trended.
This summer, they're back. Jin, V, Jungkook, Jimin, Snoop. Bad Decisions.
The music video for Bad Decisions comes out on Friday, 12 p.m. Super Junior's She Won will not make it to the boy group's concert in the country after catching COVID-19. The Korean actor and singer tested positive for the virus after their Super Show 9 tour stops in Thailand. But the rest of the 8 active members will perform at the Mall of Asia Arena in Pasay City this Saturday. In a viral video, the pop singer famous for hits like Bon Appetit seems to be saying, "Let them eat pizza." CNN's Jeannie Mose reports.
Katy Perry has dressed as an ice cream cone cake and a hamburger paired with Taylor Swift as fries. Now she's added pizza throwing to her menu, flinging slices direct from the box. It happened at a Las Vegas nightclub where Katy made a surprise appearance.
It looked like she was going to eat the pizza, but someone next to us had yelled, "Hey, we want pizza!"
They got it, slice after slice. Amanda Kurth shot this video. Did any pizza land near you?
Oh yeah, I don't think anyone caught a piece. I don't know how well she is at the pizza throwing, but there was quite a few on the ground.
At one point, she was two-handing it. Perry pizza hysteria swept the internet. Katy Perry, throw a pizza at me. Someone with tickets to an upcoming concert threatened, if she doesn't throw pizza at us, I'm asking for a refund.
There was a couple guys trying to catch it in their mouth. I wasn't going to do that.
Katy herself reposted another version of the video saying, a mother feeding her children. Someone was reminded of the time President Trump started tossing out paper towels after a hurricane hit Puerto Rico. The nightclub probably needed some paper towels. After Katy was done, in her role as the new advertising face of a food delivery service, Perry has sung about pizza. But when it comes to heaving it, she may not be quite as good as the star of Breaking Bad. It's not easy to stick a pizza. But in a twist to the Dean Martin classic, when the moon hits your eye like a big pizza pie. When Katy Perry hits your eye with a big pizza pie. That's amore. Jeannie Mose, CNN, New York.
And that is it for now. Join me again on news.ph at 7 p.m. and on Politics as usual at 8. I'm Pia Ontiveros for Newsnight, where we go above and beyond the headlines.
This program.
I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and welcome back to Med Talk Health Talk, where caring is our calling. Now, earlier on the show, we discussed rehabilitation for the body. Now, let's discuss rehabilitation for our mental health. Our guests are here today to tell us more about that. We have Dr. Joan May Perez Rifarial. She's a psychiatrist from the Veterans Memorial and Medical Center, as well as a fellow of the Philippine Psychiatric Association. We're also joined by Dr. Joyce Ann Maglake. She's a psychiatrist from the Medical City and a member of the Group for Addiction Psychiatrists here in the Philippines. Now, when we talk about mental health rehabilitation, sometimes this is not really that familiar with a lot of people, but let's talk about the importance now of mental health and its rehabilitation, especially with events such as post-traumatic stress, probably from abuse. Let's talk about that first.
This involves helping individuals who are going through traumatic experiences or other mental health conditions. It's a holistic approach. It's a process of helping these patients bring back or go back to their optimum level of functionality, optimum health, well-being, and being able to reintegrate back into the society.
And unfortunately, there's a stigma that is really prevalent here in the Philippines. Hindi pa ganun ka-open or ganun ka bukas ang mga tao to talk to a specialist pag merong problema sila when it comes to the way they think, the feelings that they have. What are some of the obvious red flags na kailangan ng kumausap ang isang tao ng mental health specialist, ng psychiatrist?
One of the red flags is persistence of symptoms like having depressed mood, lack of self-care, inability to function well in the community, in the roles nila, no? Be it in the office, in the workplace, in their roles as parents, for example, or in their roles in the academe. So there is a persistence of symptoms. Usually we give it a time frame of 2 weeks na bagsak ang mood, the inability to function, to do the things or tasks that they need to do. Number 2, there is that functional decline already, functional impairment, decline in performance in their tasks, in their roles, in their required ability or the fulfillment of their roles in the workplace, in their roles in the society or community. And lastly, when they began to entertain negative forms of coping, unhealthy forms of coping, like entertaining negative thoughts about themselves, engaging in negative behaviors or unhealthy coping habits. These are the 3 red flags that we need to watch out for.
Joan, you mentioned earlier a holistic approach when it comes to treating someone with this. An example we gave earlier was post-traumatic stress. When it comes to the holistic approach, anong pinag-uusapan natin dito?
Biologically, we look at it from the perspective of maybe those at risk for developing symptoms of PTSD can have some genetic component to it. But we are not saying that for those naman who would have a family history of PTSD would develop PTSD later on. It's not naman like that. So there can be the genetic component and hormonal imbalance in the brain, specifically serotonin, which is the neurotransmitter responsible for the development of symptoms of PTSD. Psychologically, we look at the coping strategies, coping skills of the individual who goes through a traumatic experience. Socially, we look at the availability of social support available for the person. Experiences a traumatic event never goes through this situation on his or her own. Mas maganda, social support is there and through the help of loved ones, family. Lastly, spirituality also. It's about finding the purpose and meaning of what is happening, of what happened. And maybe from there, we can reflect, we can do meditation, and from there, grow from the situation.
For those with chronic mental illnesses, what is the benefit of this naman, Dr. Joyce?
Substance abuse is also one of those, and others. Rehabilitation offers a structure. The social aspect is very important because sometimes we can't control triggers. Usually when we put them in a safe environment, we ensure that there are no triggers there. And at the same time, we're working on the personal level, enhancing their coping mechanisms.
Can you tell our viewers what's a good first step? Who should they call? Who should they approach? So that they can at least get the proper referral to a mental health specialist?
In the workplaces, I think HR personnel are trained also to monitor and maybe know some of the warning signs and symptoms of a possible mental health concern. They can also go to or call hotlines. There are several helplines available, which are open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and they may call and ask help from psychologists and psychiatrists. What's important is that they remember that help is always available and we collaborate. We always work as a team together with the family or with the loved ones or the company where the person is working at.
When we return, we'll talk about rehabilitation for people struggling with substance issues. This is Med Talk Health Talk. We'll be right back. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and this is Med Talk Health Talk. The World Health Organization and United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime say that there is around 35 million people who suffer from substance use disorders worldwide. However, only 1 in 6 people who are eligible for drug-dependent treatment have access to treatment programs. Here in the Philippines, an estimated 1.7 million Filipinos were taking dangerous drugs in 2019. And in the same year, there were only 5,277 recorded admissions inpatient and outpatient facilities, excluding those who are accessing services through community-based programs. Dr. Joyce, when it comes to substance abuse, let's talk about some of the more common ones here in the Philippines. drugs, of course, as well as alcohol. A lot of people say that they're taking any of these substances in recreational capacity. They're totally in control with themselves. But what are some of the red flags that you already need help?
We have to be aware of the fact that usually people who are already deep in their addiction would have difficulty admitting or seeing that there's already a functional decline. So for family members, it's usually you guys who would be the first ones to notice this. So for example, if there's a very significant shift from baseline, so maybe before they used to be very punctual in work, they are very responsible, and then you start to notice that they have increased absences, they're always going home late, and then you notice withdrawal symptoms such as mood changes, some physiological changes when they don't have the substance, increased time spent to actually get those substances. So for example, in the pandemic, there are a lot of people who would risk getting COVID just to get their hands on those substances, even alcohol. So all of these things, functional impairment is really the red flag, I think, that is very apparent for even family members to notice.
Now, Dr. Joyce, is this the best way to approach a person who has that problem through an intervention, which is very confrontational, to say the least?
Yes, so usually if it is quite confrontational, it makes the person become more defensive. But a family intervention is actually a good way to sort of put it all out on the table. But my recommendation is to actually consult first with either an addiction counselor or a psychiatrist, because oftentimes we can do this together. So we use language that isn't as confrontational, or we use a method that would enable them to really see these red flags. That is, if the patient or if the person who's using the substance doesn't have any comorbid psychiatric conditions. Otherwise, for example, if they're already harming themselves, or sometimes we do see psychosis, there's no intervention anymore. They have to be brought to the ER.
So let's talk about the rehabilitation process itself. A specialized center is ideal for this kind of situations. What is the goal in rehabilitation centers, Joyce?
Sobriety. Lifestyle of sobriety. So this is like what Dr. June mentioned for mental health in general. It's the same thing for substance and functional addictions. Biological, so you address any biological effect of the substance. Psychological, what triggers the individual or what perpetuates their use. And social, what social factors actually promote the use of the substance. And then the last goal of rehabilitation is actually reintegration. So we reintegrate them back to society, back to their community. Otherwise, if we're unable to do that step, they may be at risk again for maybe developing another mental health problem and then using the substances again.
Someone who has gone through the rehabilitation program, the rehabilitation center, are they completely cured? If not, what are some of the reasons why someone would go into relapse?
Sometimes, because of social cues from the environment, like the presence of people who may be also engaging in those types of substances, cues from the family, or there can be some enablers in the family as well. So these are some of the reasons for relapse. And very importantly, what's really important is to look into possible underlying mental health concerns which may co-occur with the substance use problem. Because we know that when we are not able to treat the underlying mental health concerns like depression, anxiety as the reason for a person to engage or to use substances. But there's a message like using substances or alcohol to numb our emotions because someone goes through depression. So we need to address those underlying mental health concerns which may lead someone to engage in substance use.
Now, Dr. Joyce, could you share with our viewers that notion or that saying of one day at a time? How does this method work?
Oftentimes, when we talk about our rehabilitation, it's really part of our knowledge there is to recognize that it is what we call a chronically relapsing disorder. So sometimes when we focus so much on thinking that, oh, I won't get tempted anymore, or oh, everything is okay, I'm already cured about it, the temptations would come because you're not as mindful or as aware or present of your environment. So that's actually the concept of staying present, staying attuned with your environment each day. And living sobriety is really an embodiment in the moment. So that's why we take it one day at a time. So if you notice in media, for example, in movies, in Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous, people would always say the number of years that they've been sober rather than saying, oh, I'm completely cured. Because it's really a lifestyle thing. So we have to maintain it each day, every day of our lives.
Thank you very much, Dr. Joyce Ann and Maglake and Dr. Joan May Perez Refarial for being with us today and sharing your tips and expertise, especially about mental rehabilitation. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and we'll see you again next time here on MedTalk Health Talk. The path to recovery of people with disabilities and addiction can be daunting, especially when they face them alone. But thanks to rehabilitation services, we're helping them step by step go back to their healthier state. This month, we are celebrating the National Disability Prevention and Rehabilitation Week. And apart from physical therapy, we will discuss other methods for rehabilitation for both mental health as well as substance issues. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and this is MedTalk Health Talk on CNN Philippines. Our first guest is here today to tell us more about the physical part of rehabilitation. With us is Dr. Rodolfo Estrellado Jr. He's a rehabilitation medicine specialist from the Asian Hospital and Medical Center and the Philippine Academy of Rehabilitation Medicine. The World Health Organization defines rehabilitation as a way for the person to optimize their function, to regain back their function and their interaction with the environment. Let's talk about the main function of rehabilitation, whether it be maybe after an injury, after a sickness for that matter. What is the main goal why someone would go into physical rehabilitation?
It's not just after a patient actually feels something, goes before that. It's also preventive in terms of treating these patients. But our main goal in essence is achieving maximum function, or in general, to improve their quality of life.
For those who are familiar with stroke, someone who has survived a stroke, more often than not will have some residual effects. Mahina yung ibang parte ng katawan nila. Let's talk about that with someone who has suffered a stroke. How effective is it in bringing back that quality of life, that ability to function every day?
More commonly, people we see are people with yung tinatawag na hemiplegia, or one side of their body is weak. So our focus here is to get as much function back through maybe physical therapy, through occupational therapy. We try to help them move about more, try to return their hand function if we can, and even try to achieve as close to normal as they are able to get after the stroke.
It's very important that you talk to your medical specialist to get the proper diagnosis so your treatment can be tailor-fit for you. Pag-usapan naman natin some things that our viewers might not typically think of, and that is work-related injuries. One of the most common ones, low back pain. Marami sa ating mga viewers, I'm sure hindi sila magpapatingin sa low back pain until hindi na nila kayang gawin ito. But how effective is physical therapy or whatnot in order for them to regain their functionality, their efficiency back at work?
We've noticed, especially during the pandemic, is that a lot of people started having low back pain, maybe because work from home, no, lagi nakaupo. I think the most important thing to do first is to actually identify the cause of their back pain. And more commonly, what we see for patients who are experiencing low back pain, it's a mechanical cause, no, or muscle spasm because of their typical work environment. Lagi nakaupo, for example, lack of exercise. The treatment would range between giving medication, no, to ease the pain, relax the muscle, up to strengthening yung core muscles nila to prevent the back pain from recurring again.
Is this the same as yung madalas na gawin, papamasahe ko lang to, papamasahe ko lang yung low back pain ko, okay na to? Is what is done in rehabilitation therapy much different from just a simple masahe?
That is a common misconception that physical therapy is all masahe lamang. No? Yes, massage or masahe is part of the arsenal that our physical therapists have to treat and manage this back pain. But that is not all that is important when it comes to treating these patients. No? I personally greatly emphasize that exercise is much better in treating these low back pain patients than just plain masahe. Ang dami kasi talaga parang masahe lang. Yeah, you're correct, no?
Okay.
Parang masahe lang, mawawala na to. But that will not prevent the back pain from recurring.
Okay, now let's go to another end of rehabilitation medicine, and that is the loss of a limb for either through trauma or through other medical conditions. What is the goal in trying to regain that functionality again with the use of a prosthesis?
The goal in terms of prosthetic fitting can be widely ranging, no? So it would also depend on how they got yung amputation. So majority of patients in the Philippines, I think, underwent amputation because of a diabetic foot. Because this patient is diabetic, they would have different concomitant diseases. Some would have problems with the heart, where sensation. So it would range from treating them using prosthetics to help them walk. No, yun yung maximal range. Some patients can even join sporting events with the use of a prosthesis. And at the other end of the spectrum, some patients can use the prosthesis merely as a cosmetic, or only for cosmetic use.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rodolfo Estrelado Jr. for being with us today and sharing your insights with our viewers. Next, we'll talk about rehabilitating your mental health. This is Med Talk Health Talk. We'll be right back.